Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Florida Interest Network training on advocacy. We have our special guest today is Melinda Piller, who is the lobbyist for the Florida Marriage and Family Therapists. She has been lobbyist when our organization was called the Florida Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, and now she's our lobbyist for the Florida Interest Network. And we were just discussing that we've been working together for something in the neighborhood of 17 years. A good long while. In fact, I've known you so long that you weren't Dr. Piller when I first met you, and now you are Dr. Piller. So it's very nice to know you and have you grow all this time. And we're very excited. We've just come off a very interesting and exciting 2022 legislative season. And so I turn it over to you, Dr. Piller.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Schooley. And yes, I have lived and loved and just appreciated my friendship and my camaraderie with Anna Lynn and so many other marriage and family therapists over the years. It has been my honor and pleasure for over a decade, almost 2 decades, which will tell you how young that we both are, but we started when we were 12. Little background on me, been representing folks for 3 decades plus, K through 12 educators, Florida Association, Florida Education Association, which is the largest association in the state of Florida. And I was senior manager and their head of lobbying and political work. Anyway, I am now a higher ed educator, Thomas University. I'm the chair of the business department. I've got my undergrad, my master's in public administration, and then my PhD is in business and organizational management. So that's my educational background, just a little background on me. But anyway, tonight I want to talk about 3 major issues. And I wanted to give everyone a little bit of current information, especially when we're just, regular folks out here living our lives. We really aren't interested or engaged in what the crazy legislature or the crazy politicians are doing unless it affects us directly. Unfortunately, we don't realize how much it all affects us directly. And that's kind of what I want to emphasize tonight for you. For those of you that are live with me or watching the recording, and I said this last year when we did a training, there is pretty much not much in our lives that is not regulated or licensed, or there's not some kind of oversight, from the air we breathe, water we drink, how we drive down the road, how we build our homes. It just goes on and on and on, educate our children, et cetera, run our professions. So tonight I want to talk about the election cycle, because I think it's interesting, and we are in a time when it's very interesting, and term limits. I think this is something that all citizens need to be aware of. I'll talk about redistricting, because that's what's happening. It happens every 10 years. It has a great effect on us. And I want to talk about that briefly. Then I want to talk about the importance of registering to vote, because the bottom line is that it is a privilege. It is not a right. It is a privilege for all of us to be able to cast our ballot. And one vote does make a difference. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then finally, for this little evening of conversation, I want to talk about the importance of knowing your legislators and the opportunity that we have right now, this summer, this fall, on getting to know our legislators. So let me start from the very beginning. And for those of you that are live, if you have a question, interrupt me by all means. It won't hurt my feelings at all. I'll run through this, but I certainly am open to questions. I may not have all the answers, but I'll do my best based on my experience and based on what I know is happening right now. So here we go. Just a little information about our elected officials and term limits. There was a time, and I was lobbying at that time, when there were no term limits, and institutional knowledge was valued. In other words, institutional knowledge by legislators, elected officials that could get elected and elected and elected over and over again. That changed a good while ago, many years ago. because folks decided, and it became sort of a national trend. It doesn't happen everywhere, but it happens in most instances. People decided that you shouldn't be in office so long. Now, that's not necessarily on the federal level, but here in Florida, it is absolutely, you shouldn't be there so long. So they created term limits. And the term limit is 8 years. 8 years and you're out. Now that has all kinds of ramifications. 8 years and we get somebody new, yay, but 8 years and we've lost all that institutional knowledge and all the mistakes they made, hopefully they learned from, have gone out the door. They can pass it on, but they really can't participate anymore. In the Senate, these are 4-year terms. So they're allowed to run twice. And in the House, they're allowed to run 4 times because they're two-year terms, which means that every 2 years, the House of Representatives, Florida's House of Representatives, they have to become reelected, or someone else has to be elected in that particular position. On the Senate side, fewer senators, they get to hang for 4 years. Then they get to hang for 4 more years. And what happens typically is that someone will run for the legislature, become an elected official, stay their 8-year term, 2, and then they'll run for the Senate. So they, in essence, will be in 2 different houses, Senate versus House, 2 different locations in the Florida legislature, that they will actually be able to hang around for 16 years. Something to just consider as a voter. We've got 160 legislators. 120 of them are House members running every 2 years, and then 40 in the Senate that run every 4 years. In the Senate, the terms are staggered. So not all senators rather, no, they're all legislators, but senators, not all senators will run for re-election every 4 years. They are staggered, which gives us some institutional knowledge and a little bit of stability. But as I said, they are limited. Now, I want to talk about the election cycle because we are having a general election this year, November 8th, and we will elect 20 of our 40 senators, state senators. So half of the state Senate either will be reelected or we will have new state senators. So that's going to be something of interest in your particular community. You need to pay attention. Any questions? If not, I'll just keep going.
I just want to note that it's mind-boggling that only 160 people make all the decisions about the laws in our entire state.
Well, they are the lawmakers and the policymakers, but the regulatory boards make the rules how those policies are implemented, and the heads of departments, state departments, make the rules as to how they will implement law. So there are a lot of players and decision makers, policy makers, but they don't get into the weeds. They don't do the particulars. They do some particulars, but not how it will actually day-to-day be implemented. So yes, there's 160 that make decisions about our lives in Florida and in other states. Other states have different numbers. They're called different things. They're not necessarily legislators. They could be delegates. There's just all different kinds of structures depending on the state. So I want to talk about redistricting because we're in redistricting right now. And this is an incredible phenomenon. Every 10 years, federally, by law, we have to do a census, right? The government wants to know who's living where, who they are, what are their households, what are their ethnicities, what are their genders, what are their ages. I mean, they want data. They collect data. Based on that collected data, states will either lose a federal representative, a congressperson, or they will gain, depending on their population. It happens every 10 years. And the next step that we'll talk about follows that census. So in the latest census, the decennial, which is the every 10-year data collection, which was 2020, the following year, they set it up where they release that data, and we either lose a congressperson, or, because everyone has 2 senators, everyone, no matter what size you are, you get 2 senators. That's the representation, but not necessarily the same number of congressmen. So depending on that population, you either lose a congressman or woman, or you gain. In our situation in Florida, our surprise, surprise, our numbers have grown. So we have picked up an additional congressional seat. We've picked up an additional congressional seat. We are the 3rd most populous state in the country, which is pretty consistent. New York, California, Florida, New York, California, Florida. That's kind of how it's been for a long, long time. But the numbers have grown. So we now have 28 congressional seats in Florida. I did not do the research as to where they are, but 28 is a huge number to be represented on the federal level. So we have a big voice, right, when it comes to the Congress. Based on population growth captured during the decennial, which is the census gathering time, we received a total now of 28. And here's what we have. Our population, 21 million. Now you have to understand, and just to put this in some kind of comparable viewpoint, there are a number of states that are literally don't have the populations of some of our counties. We have 21,538,187. We have huge state. We are a multi-populous state. We are multicultural. Many of you live in very multicultural communities. We have rural, urban. We have countries that have become communities within the state of Florida. So diverse is an understatement as to who we are and what we represent, or who we represent. So this is Article 3, Section 16 of the Florida Constitution. They're required to update boundaries, districts. Now we're down to the state level. I talked a little bit about the feds and how we now have 28 legislators, congressional seats. Now let's take it to the state of Florida and how this works, and redistricting those congressional seats, because that's important to a lot of folks. Here's an example, congressional districts, and I pulled the map. Let me back up for just a second. This is a tremendously rigorous process to restructure districts. The language, which I will not bore you with a lot, but let me give you one example, because this is an example that I'm using for this evening's discussion. There are districts that the majority of the population are minorities. It's called a majority-minority district. So in other words, who are the minorities? Well, we have Black, Hispanic. I'm not sure really if we now have Haitian or Cuban. I'm going to plead ignorant on that. I'll have to do the research, which I haven't, because typically it's the Hispanic or a Black district, primarily a Black district, but a majority of a minority. Now, if you are a minority represented in one of these districts, you like to have someone that understands your issues, understands your community, understands your values. And restructuring that district may hamper your ability as a voter or a voting population to elect someone that represents your particular community. And that's where you get into trouble. Typically, legislators will draft up dozens and dozens of new maps. And more than likely, it ends up in the courts. The courts make the final decision, because they're always fighting and arguing. So in 2016, the Florida Supreme Court, because it ended up in court, which they typically do, and I'd like you to look at this carefully. This is the map. Let me do this to make it really carefully easier. know if you can see this.
I don't see the map yet. You may have to minimize the Word doc to do that.
Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to share again. You'll see it now. You
Sure
see that?
do. Yep, we see it.
Okay, let's look up at the panhandle of Florida. See Tallahassee and Jacksonville? This was in 2016. Whoops, sorry about that. Look at District 2. Look at District 5. Look at District 4. This is based on population. That's what it's supposed to be based on. But it doesn't necessarily work that way. So District 2, look how big that is. That's based on population, supposedly. And then look at District 5, a little narrower, but it goes all the way over to Jacksonville. See how it kind of hooks? This is called gerrymandering. Districts can be drawn in all kinds of configurations, and whoever is in power politically has the power, the ability to draw these maps. So they can, in fact, draw a district that will benefit their particular party. So in this instance, all across District 2, look how big this is. This is a very conservative area of Florida. I would argue, not 100%, I live in Tallahassee. It is a very democratic town. It's the college, university town, government town. But I would argue that all of this is very Republican, very military, very rural. And that's how it's drawn. Any comments or questions? I hope you see what I'm talking about.
I do see, because I noticed 13, 14, 15 is the Tampa area.
Based on population.
Right. And then I'm looking at
Laker
Broward,
Patrol
which
area.
is 25 and 27.
2021.
Oh, that's Broward? Okay.
Yeah, well, Broward is up here.
Okay.
See Miami, look at Miami.
Yeah.
And then of course you've got the Keys based on population, but they also draft these based on political interests. That's
yes.
So if I'm in charge and I'm a Republican legislature, I'm going to draft districts that will benefit my party, right? I want to have more Republicans so we can elect more Republicans. If I am a Democrat in power, I'm going to draft districts that will have more, maybe they're going to be more minority majorities because they typically vote Democrat. So depending on who is in power, that's how we're going to draft our maps. And then what happens is that whoever is not in power files lawsuits, and whoever makes, and eventually it goes to courts and they make the final decision. And they're supposedly not making anybody happy. So let me tell you, we stop sharing and go back to my little, so I have another one I want to show you. This is the current map. This is the map that has been drawn based on the governor's wishes. And the Florida legislature did not debate, did not come up with a lot of options. They said, this is what you want, Governor DeSantis, that's what you'll get. And that's exactly what happened. Now I'll show you the difference and we'll look at that Tallahassee area. Let me just do this. You have to do it twice, which makes no sense, but it's the way it works. And can you see this?
Yes.
That's the old one. Sorry. Let me take it down. Whoops, sorry. Stop sharing. Let me find the one I want to show you. Let me go back. sorry, guys. I want to go back to this. And I want to show you the current redistricting map, which I would venture to say will go to the courts. I don't know why that didn't work. I'll do it one more time. Bear with me. Okay. Now, can you see that map? I just brought up in it's
I think you need, again, I think you need to take down the Word document. Yeah.
okay. Here it is. Now, can you see that?
Yes.
Now look at the difference
Oh my.
between what you just saw the last time it was restructured to what you see now. This area, which was majority minority, which means it was a very minority African-American district that went all, remember I pointed out that hook in Jacksonville? The hook's gone, doesn't go anywhere near Jacksonville. What they've done with this map is they've completely diluted that minority vote. Interesting.
Very.
Who's in power make those decisions. And of course, there's one lawsuit after another has been filed. And eventually, the court will make the decision. But what they've done is, it happens to be my congressman, and they have completely cut him out of, he is an African-American gentleman. And he's one of my congressmen in Tallahassee. And
so as they redistrict, does that mean that there are some Congress people who their seat essentially disappears because of this?
Could be based on election.
Oh,
now,
okay.
They may be in office right now, but congressmen have to run every couple of years. You know, on the federal level, state senators have a 6-year term. Not so in the House. They have to continue to run every 4 years. They run every 4 years. I said 2, I'm sorry. They run every 4 years. So it's a whole different ballgame. So they, in fact, could easily vote out the sitting congressman because his natural constituency, which is African-American, will no longer be the majority. That minority will no longer be the majority. If I've totally confused you, I did my job. It's crazy, crazy, crazy.
So I do have this question, Melinda. So
Yeah.
I see that there are 28 districts.
Yeah.
There are 40 senators.
No, these are congressional. This is federal.
Oh, this is federal. I'm sorry. So there are 28 federal congressional districts. Okay. And so is the map going to be different for the state districts?
Oh, yeah.
For those senators and everything? And does that also get redrawn with the census?
Sure, absolutely.
Ah, I see.
And what happened, again, based on population, but of course, based on political party that's in charge, they're all going to get adjusted. This is a very dramatic example, which is why I use this for this presentation this evening, because that district has been ripped in half or less, and it completely lost their Jacksonville representation, which was a strong minority majority. So I use this as the example to show how the party in charge can revamp representation with a map. Okay, so let me, with your permission, move on. I thought that this was really, really important to show you. Can you all see this?
Yes, we see the Word document. Yes.
Okay. So now we're up to registering to vote. Now you see the importance of registering to vote is that if you want a voice, if you want to access the privilege that you have as a Floridian, as a resident, then you need to register to vote. And it's really simple. And I wanted to make sure that everyone knew exactly how that worked. So even if you're registered to vote, this is good information. It's always a good refresher, because they changed the laws. They don't it stops that and go, oh, let me see here. I want to take this. I want to go to, forgive me, guys. I got to get out of this view so I can get to my, Google this up for you. Okay, now I'm going to come back. Let me come back to you all.
So as you pulling that up, so essentially there will be two different maps. There's the one you just showed us, which is the federal congressional districts. And then there's going to be the state
That's right.
congressional districts.
Well,
and so we need to know the numbers for all those different things.
They're not state congressional, they're state legislator districts.
Okay, state legislator districts. Okay.
Okay, I want to do this and do this. Yeah, they're gonna play around. Now, that there hasn't been a lot of controversy or heavy duty discussion about the state level redistricting, but they are maneuvering and they are adjusting, and they are doing that to their benefit. So the conservatives that are in charge are now looking for more conservative votes. So they're going to draft, or they have been drafting districts that will have more conservative voters in them. And they will attempt to do their very best to cut out those that do not agree with their particular political beliefs. It works, both parties do it. It's not unique, it's the way of the world. So this is something that anyone can pull up, but I thought it would be interesting for this evening. How you can register to vote. You just get on. This is information for voting in Florida. And then I'm going to show you how to get on. So here are the deadlines for registering, and registering in person by July 25. You need to be registered. If you want to vote by mail, July 25, there's your deadline. And it has to be postmarked by the 25th. You can't just get there on the 27th. They won't let you do that. Now, I just want to tell you that these are new laws in Florida, as there are in many other states. You probably heard that a lot of states have had really controversial changes in their election laws. Some argue that they make it more difficult for minorities or poor folks to get to the older folks to get to vote. They have taken away boxes for people to drive in and drop off their ballot in some states. I'm in Georgia right now, North Georgia mountains. I live in North Florida, and Georgia has without Georgians can vote. Online registration deadline, all the same. July 25 for Florida, July 25, July 25. Eligibility details will be laid out here as well. Voters may retrieve registration applications from the following locations. So you can you can fill out your application online, or you can turn it into your local supervisor of election office. There's a lot of places that you can turn your registration. They're saying you can go to where you get your driver's license. You can go where you get your hunting license or fishing. You can go to a public library. You can go to a assistance agency. Maybe some of you work at an assistance agency, or you may work at a particular institution. There's a possibility that you could register to vote right there. Military, recruitment offices. But voting, when does it begin? Well, here in Florida, now in some states it's already started. The primaries. It was on the news last night. There were, I want to say 4 states, maybe 5 states number of them out west. Pennsylvania is a big hot election state. And right now they've got two, they've got a runoff. Remember Dr. Oz? You've seen Dr. Oz on TV. There's a good chance that he will be elected. I believe he's running for state senator. For U.S. senator, and he will in Pennsylvania, and a big Trump-backed candidate. Just a little sidebar. So, where can you learn more about voter registration requirements? Well, this is a link that you can click on and find out all kinds of interesting information. But early voting in Florida starts in August on the 13th. And it's good until the 20th. So I like to vote early personally. So I'll go to my precinct. Right now it's for early voting, it would be, I could go to my library. It wouldn't be where I'd go for my, I guess I had to go in person there too. It's changed. One time it was, for years, it was at a church. Now it's at a library, but I can go and vote early. And that way I don't get mixed up with the crowds, or I vote by mail a lot of times too. So I have to watch this deadline. The poll times on election day are from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening. That's pretty standard in most states, quite frankly. And here's a whole list of things that you can take so that you can be identified and you can vote. This is all state law, and it's important. They're not going to just let anybody walk in. You have to register in Florida. You have to be able to have proof in a number of ways. And if you have an ID, it says a voter who presents an ID without a signature must show a second form of identification. So you have to be ready. I believe when I decided when COVID hit to vote by mail as well, I had to call my supervisor of elections office and request that mail-in ballot. And I believe our laws changed in Florida to where I need to do that every single election cycle. They will no longer just send me a mail-in ballot. I have to personally request it each time, which makes it challenging for some folks. You just forget, you get busy. So, and the deadline for requesting a ballot is August 13th. If the request deadline is postmarked, it better be postmarked by then. And you got to return it within 10 days by the 23rd. So it's a very short window that you have if you want to vote by mail. Now or by absentee, by absentee. So who would vote by absentee? Well, military, not living in the area, maybe not living in the country. They will have provisions for that. But there's also a lot of folks that don't live necessarily in Florida or necessarily in their district. Maybe they're working someplace else. They really have to be sharp if they want to vote absentee. Or there are a lot of folks that don't live in Florida all the time. If they are part-time Floridians, but they vote in Florida, they better pay attention to deadlines. The convicted felon issue is really interesting. The allowing convicted felons that were out of prison to vote, to get their right, to get their privilege back, not their right, to get their privilege back to vote, a statewide amendment that citizens voted on. It wasn't a legislative decision, the citizens, it was a citizen initiative. And it passed. This is a few years ago. And they said, yes, you could, in fact, vote if you had paid your time, put in your time, and you were released. However, a decision was made a couple years ago where they said, well, we will let you vote if you put in your time, but you also paid all your penalties. So typically, if someone isn't, and I can't speak from experience, thank you, Lord, but if people they're incarcerated, they're not necessarily wealthy folks, the majorities for sure. The majority are probably minority for sure, and they don't have the funds to pay the fines or to pay the restitution or to pay. So this was a little caveat that a judge, Robert Hinkle, from the U.S. District Court of North Northern District of Florida ruled, requiring felons to pay all outstanding fines before they were allowed to register to vote. And some are arguing, there's lawsuits about this, that this is unconstitutional. So whether you agree with that or not isn't really the point. The point is that that is exactly what's going on right now in Florida. So any comments or questions about that?
Quick question. So if you present to the polls with one of those IDs, but you're not registered, you will not be able to vote. Because you had a whole list of IDs, but this is assuming you are registered. But then when you appear at the poll, you also have to provide ID in order to cast your ballot. But if you just show up with those IDs, but you are not officially registered, you're not on the rolls, you won't be able to vote. Is that correct?
Yes, in Florida, now some states you can do that, but in Florida, we do not have same-day registration.
Gotcha.
Some folks in some states, and I don't know exactly which ones, but I know there's a number of them, you can actually register the same day and then you can vote, but that's not the case in Florida.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks.
That's a good question, Dr. School. It's a very good question. Okay, this is the next piece I want to show you. Let's play with this for just a second. Still on voting. Okay. Now I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to share. Let me find it. Oh, no, this is the one. Here we go. Now, this is about, and I pulled this is the Florida Department of State online registration. It's really not difficult. It's pretty easy. So to say you didn't have time or you didn't have availability, I guess you could argue that both ways, because look at this. Immediately voter to vote in Florida. You are welcome. You can have English or Hispanic as options. You can register for the first time, or you can update your voter registration. Maybe you've moved. And then it just says, am I already registered? You can look yourself up. You may not even know that you're registered to vote. Maybe it's been so many years, you can't remember whether you're registered or not. So this will walk you right through an online application. What they're asking for is your driver's license and the date of your license, and last four of your social, a little bit of information, and who is eligible. Well, you must be a citizen. You must be a legal resident. You must be a legal resident of Florida and the county in which you want to vote. You have to be at least 16 years old in some states. Let's see, to pre-register, or at least 18 to register and vote. I'm glad I finished that sentence. So at least 16 to pre-register. I wonder how many young people do that. And then at least 18 to actually register and vote. Not be a person who has been adjudicated mentally incapacitated with respect to voting rights, and not a person convicted of a felon without having their right to vote restored. Remember, I just talked about that money issue, those fines. So in other words, they're not restored unless they pay. And here's the deadline for primary election. You can click on that and see what your deadline is. And there's the governor and the Secretary of State. But again, you can do this right online. You don't have to physically go anywhere to register to vote. You just have to do it in a timely fashion. Any comments or questions? Okay, we will move on here real quick. So I want to talk about knowing your legislator. And this is what it all boils down to. So I talked about the redistricting and how things are changing, and the political party that's in charge can really make a difference in regards to who represents you or who doesn't, and how they represent you or where they represent you. Talked about voting and the importance of voting, how you can register to vote without ever leaving your home or your office. But you do have deadlines, and depending on how you want to vote, you need to follow those deadlines and make sure that you provide the information and identification that's required on a state level and per county as well. Now, you don't have to register as a Democrat, and you don't have to register as a Republican. You can register as an independent, but there is a caveat to that. In a primary, where you have a number of folks that are running so that they can be the party's representative for the general election, an independent in Florida cannot vote in that primary. That's only party voting. That's not the same case in some states, but in Florida, that's the case. So if you file as an independent, register as an independent, you wait until the general election, and then you will vote, either Democrat, Republican, or if there's an independent candidate, of your choice. Something to consider when you register. Now, getting to know your legislators. So the restructuring is happening. It's a campaign season. This is campaign year for legislators, campaign year for congressional folks, for state legislators, and for federal congressional folks. 24 is election year for the governor of Florida. But in the meantime, this summer, all these campaigns are going on. And in August, the primaries will happen. So then the two parties will decide who will be their representative in the general election. Where does that take marriage and family therapists? Where does that put marriage and family therapists across the state? Well, it's opportunity. And the opportunity is to figure out, based on your voter registration card, based on Googling your supervisor of elections and seeing what district you live in, and then who is running. And the supervisor elections site has all that information. Or you can learn on social media, or you can learn on Facebook, or you can learn on the news. It's everywhere. So you, as a marriage and family therapist student or practitioner, intern, have the opportunity to participate in a campaign of your choice. You can easily volunteer. They are desperate for help, whether that's making phone calls or sending emails or knocking doors, walking a community. I don't know, it depends on what they need, but volunteers are gold. Now, you cannot represent the whole entire marriage and family therapy community or FIN, but you can represent yourself, and you can be a conduit to other marriage and family therapists. Just the presence of a marriage and family therapist in a campaign speaks volumes. And in the world of COVID, in the world of family crisis, which we are all living in, there's no one more important than a family counselor. There's no one more important than a family support system. So you really have an opportunity to get engaged before they get elected. Now, you might get engaged and your particular favorite doesn't get elected, so be it. It's a great experience. The first time I ever participated in a campaign, I volunteered and I made phone calls. This was in Pinellas County in St. Petersburg. And the next thing I did, I was managing a legislative race, a primary legislative race, and my candidate lost. But the experience drove me to a career of 30 plus years. So you never know who you're going to meet or what you're going to learn or what kind of experiences you're going to have. And I highly recommend, doesn't matter the party, that's not the point. The point is being engaged. The point is participating. And the point is representing your profession, because all those policymakers and those regulators control how you do your business and how you take care of the families and individuals that you care about professionally. So with that said, I'm going to go to my last And some of you have already seen this from me, but I will get out of the full screen here. Go to the user-friendly, put that down, the user-friendly fine. Can y'all see that? Online Sunshine?
Yes.
Okay. So this is my go-to spot half a dozen times a day prior to the legislative session. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention this. Next week, there is a special session. The governor's call came mid-April, and that starts Monday of next week and runs through Friday. And it is a very limited call. They will be focused on homeowners insurance because it has skyrocketed. Some major insurance companies have left the state. So the last resort state insurance has now become the #1 choice of homeowners because they can't get insurance from private companies. The lawsuits are rampant, and so they are going to make an attempt next week to revamp, to make homeowners insurance much more affordable. It's doubled and tripled in some instances. I don't know, those of you that own property have experienced that. I know I have, and that's because of all the chaos that's going on. So that's a special session for next week. This is Online Sunshine, and Online Sunshine will tell you everything you ever wanted to know and more about what's going on in Florida in regards to the legislative world. And over here, you have every single quick link you need, but I'm going to give you a real quick example of what I do representing marriage and family therapists on a regular basis. I check committees, and here's a, whoop, too fast, committee list. Here are all the committees on the Senate side, from Ag to a Joint Legislative Budget Commission. I check the committees that I believe are the most important to marriage and family therapists. And let me go. Appropriations is a whole entity by itself. That's the money. Then you go into the content, and children, families, and elder affairs is one that we are very interested in. And now here are the members of that particular committee. And you can click on, well, I'm going to do this one just because I can. Let me go to Victor Torres down here. He's not the chair, he's not the vice chair, but he's from Orlando, and he's one of our former sponsors of our bill. And there he is. And when we ask folks to write to their legislators when we're in the heat of a session, they can easily email right here. Every legislator has a very quick link way to contact. But this is his district. He represents part of Orange County and Osceola, District 15. These are the committee assignments he's on. Senators do not have a limit on the bills they can file. House members, representatives, they do have a limit. So here are the committees that he is assigned to. Here are bills that he has introduced or co-introduced in the recent legislative session. Look at this. This is one legislator. So can you imagine how difficult it is to get a bill passed? When you have 160? Now, yes, House members have a limit. Senators don't, but this is a lot. Let me go back to this senators list. President Pro Tem, that's Jacksonville, Aaron Bean. He's been a very proactive legislator for many, many years. And bills introduced, Nassau, Duval, his area. Bills introduced. he didn't file as many. He's leadership. So he's been particular about what bills he has filed or co-introduced. I'm going to go over to the House side.
I have a question that you probably won't really be able to answer, but as we see, these senators have filed lots of, tens of 10, 20, 30, 40 different bills. As they file them, what is the expectation? Do they feel like they're lucky if they get one passed, or what is the expectation as they start filing bills?
Well, I think it depends on the position that the legislator's in.
Sure.
In other words, if you're leadership, if you are the speaker, or you are pro tem, or you are a minority or majority whip, your chances are pretty doggone good of getting a bill or two passed. But this is the percentage of bills that are actually passed as compared to the bills that are filed is minuscule. Very, very small percentage. And what's going to actually happen in passing a bill is going to be that the leadership says it's okay and they want it. And if they have no interest in it, the bill can be filed year after year after year and nothing will ever happen. It will never even go into a committee to be heard. And some bills are like that. So, it just really depends on who's in charge. Maybe I didn't answer your question or what their expectations are. If you're a brand new legislator and really well liked and leadership likes you a lot and you're one of the chosen, you may pass a bill your first year. They'll do that. It'll be an innocuous bill. They would do that just to give you that taste. There's maybe they're grooming you for leadership. There's just a lot of pieces to that puzzle. It's a good question, but because of term limits, remember they can only be there 8 years. People with very little experience become leaders very quickly. So it's a real contest of tenacity, of networking, money. It's a different animal as compared to if there were no limits, people would have to grow to get a leadership position. People would have to pay their dues back in the day to get a leadership position. So passing bills would be part of that growth.
It would be more like academia, where you publish papers as a way to elevate yourself, but it goes so much faster now since the time limits. One quick question. I'm noticing the time, Melinda. On this website, if I want to find my district, let's say I don't know my district, and I'm on here, how do I find who my legislators are?
Well, the first thing I would want you to do is look at your voter registration card, because it's right there on the back. It might be on the phone. That's the easiest way to do it. And quite frankly, I just Google, let Florida legislative district for, and put your town in there. Don't necessarily put your county, but you could put your county, but even your city, it's going to pop up with electronics nowadays. It's not necessarily going to be easy on here. On this particular site, you can look at, here's the Florida redistricting website. You can look at.
Well, it said find your representative.
Yeah, but you have to know who your representative is.
Oh,
so,
I see.
Yeah, so we could look at, let me see if there's a quick link here on the House. The Senate side is much more user-friendly. I'm
so
sure
like you're saying, it's not easy to find on this.
Well, okay, so find your representative, and this is how they have them listed. They just list them like this.
Okay.
So
alphabetical, yeah.
They just list them like this. Now, let's just pick this particular legislator, House member. They lay out a whole different, it's very different from the Senate side. Same information, but laid out different format. Here's the detailed district map of her district. Not real user-friendly, in my opinion. So here's statistics on her district. Here's the demographic profile, which is how they redistrict, the numbers and the demographics. And this is, a lot of this information is on the proposals. So I would say, and maybe I should sound smarter, but I would go ahead and just Google my town and my home and say, what district am I in, and see what pops up.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
I just make it easy, because this is under, when you go on here, this is under the assumption that you already know who your legislator is. You just have to find them.
Okay. Okay, good.
I'm sure if I sat here long enough, I could probably find it, but I'm not sure that.
Okay. Well, there's so many more steps, I think, to advocacy. And I think it would be great if we did another one of these to talk about some of those things, such as having participants find their legislators, maybe sending, work together to send a quick email introducing yourself or that sort of thing. That would be wonderful. And maybe in a second event, we could talk about how one would go about volunteering to do campaigning. Where would you even start? And I think that would be a useful thing to do as well, because like you said, if a campaign knows there's an MFT in the room, that's a good thing, and they might use you in a way that you would find surprising if you put yourself out there. So
I hope tonight was helpful, and I didn't mean to run over my time, but it's a complicated, it's a complicated world out there, political world. And so if marriage and family therapists want to have a voice, which they do, they want to have a voice, they have to participate. And knowing the lay of the land, at least a general idea, I would think would help motivate folks to get registered. And if possible, get involved in a campaign this summer and this fall. And if primary is too quick, there's a general election. You've got till the end of the year, till November. So there's a lot of opportunity.
Excellent. Excellent. I think this has been a good lesson in civics, and if MFTs want to move forward their agenda, both for themselves as professionals and for their clients, we have to know what the process is. So Melinda, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Everybody stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye.